Today we're going to be looking at setting up a Java development environment with the end goal of being able to run LibGDX. Basically this means we're going to run through installing the Java development kit, the Android kit, optionally Google Web Toolkit, and then finally LibGDX itself and run its project setup. After that, I'll do two separate videos, one on configuring and running Eclipse, and one on configuring and running IntelliJ. If you're a NetBeans user, you are on your own. But basically, this install is going to assume you have nothing installed as of yet, other than, of course, your operating system. I'm going to be installing it on 64-bit version of Windows 8.1. However, the install instructions basically work out the same for Linux or Mac OS, so you should be able to follow along regardless to what operating system you're running. The very first thing we need to do is install the Java development kit. As you can see, bright blue bold here, there's a URL we're going to. It's www.oracle.com/technetwork/java/java SE/downloads. A couple important things to realize here. So first off, we want the Java JDK, not Java runtime. Java runtime is the binaries that are required to run Java applications, but the JDK is actually required to develop in Java. The other thing to realize, although confusing point is, the Java runtime is optionally available as an install as part of the JDK. So if you don't already have a version of Java installed, don't worry, the JDK can install one for you. Next up is we want Java SE. There are other versions. There's ME, which is Micro Edition, which is for embedded programming. So it's a little confusing. It sounds like it's the one you want if you want to install for phones, but that's ancient history. That would be back if you were developing for an old Nokia phone or whatever. That's what Java ME ran on, and modern embedded systems, that is. And then Java EE is Java Enterprise Edition. It's basically Java SE plus a bunch of crap you don't need. So what you want right now is Java SE, which is, I believe, Standard Edition. The next challenge is which version you want. There are three modern versions of Java: Java 6, Java 7, and Java 8. Somewhat confusingly, Java 6 used to be known as Java 1.6. So if you see it referred to as 1.6, it's Java 6. 1.7, Java 7. I don't think anyone calls it Java 8, 1.8, so you should never run into that. But anyways, you do not want Java 6. It's old, it's outdated, and most importantly, it does not work with LibGDX. So you want a higher version than that. Now your next challenge is going to be Android isn't really Java. It's Java-like. It's a blatant ripoff of Java. They had a lawsuit over this, but it is not actually Java. This has a huge impact on us in that Android is compatible with Java 7. Android will theoretically work with Java 8, but it is actually a Java 7 runtime. So if you want the path of least resistance, least bugs, least everything, if you are trying to target Android, or as it stands today, iOS, at least until RoboVM supports Java 8, that is, you want Java 7. Java 8, unfortunately, has some very nice features like delegates, and if you're using LibGDX to only create desktop applications, then by all means, use Java 8. I would recommend, personally, Java 7. So let's go ahead and find it down here through the power of pause and fast forward. I'm going to skip over the download portions, but you want to come down here and find the most recent version of Java 7, SE7, which right now, as of running this, is version 72. Just go down to the JDK and select download. So bring you over to an agreement page. Just say you agree. Pick the version that is right for your platform. As you can see, different OS versions come with different installs, but you should be used to dealing with DMG or RPM or tar files at this point. So depending on which platform you're running on, the install process is going to be slightly different at this point. As I said, I am running on a 64-bit version of Windows, so this is the executable I want here. Just go ahead and download that, and I will see you after the break. Okay, so the JDK has finished downloading, and here we are at the installer. run it, let it run a few minutes to figure out the installation parameters, and it's a very straightforward installer. You basically come in, your options here are include the source code or not. It can be useful for debugging. It's like 50 megs in size, so it's not really a big factor. And public JRE, this is a Java runtime. So if you don't already have Java installed, this will install one for you. I personally like to install things to a dev folder, which is confusing if you're from a Linux or a Mac background, but it's my nice shorthand for development. And I'm going to install it there. You obviously can install it wherever you want. You're going to be accessing it a few times, so you might want to keep the path somewhat short. Putting it in a program file is going to be a little irritating. I tend to stay away from spaces. They're still, in this day and age, somewhat problematic. But again, you can put it wherever you want. Pretty much, to be honest, for any development tool I ever install, I don't install it into a folder with spaces in it, just to make my life easier down the road. There are inevitably problems. So there you go. Java is now installed. You could run it now. There are a few things that we should do for convenience, make life a little bit easier. Two common tasks to do. One is to set an environment variable called Java_home. This is so other tools can find where Java is. This is completely optional, but it is handy. The other thing to do is to set the Java executables location in the path. This makes it so you can run it from anywhere from the command line, and I highly recommend doing this. If you're on Windows, here, let me actually show you how to get in. Let's cancel that out. Cancel that out. If you're running on Windows, simply go in, pick your My Computer, and bring up the properties. Go over to Advanced Settings, and then Environment Variables. So now what we want to do is we want to set a pair of them. The first one is Java Home. And it's the path to Java, like so. Oops. And the second one you want to do is go down and edit your path environment variable. We'll just add at the end, dev/java/JDK. And now the important part here is the executables are actually in a folder called bin. So set that path there, and your environments are now set. I'm not sure if Windows 8.1 requires a reboot at this point or not. There you go. So as you can see, Java 1.7.0_71 is now installed and configured. So now we want to move on to the next step. Let's close that all down. Now what we're configuring is the Android SDK. The Android SDK is pretty much all of Google's tools for developing for Android. It's kind of a multi-part process to get this installed. And first off, here's your URL. It's https://developer.android.com/SDK. And that'll bring you here. Now what you'll notice right away is there's this button here saying download Eclipse ADT. That is a version of the Android SDK bundled with the Eclipse environment. Even if you're working with Eclipse, I actually find this particular installer kind of annoying to use. What it does is it comes in and gives you a pre-configured Eclipse with a full Android suite. The problem is, first off, it configures Androids into really, really annoying subdirectories. And second is then you are now coupled to Eclipse for your Android stuff. So if you want to configure another tool to use the Android tools, like say IntelliJ or NetBeans down the road, you'll end up having to install the Android SDK anyways. So you're better off downloading Eclipse separately, Android separately, and configuring it later. To do that, scroll down a little bit and find download the standalone Android SDK tools, for Windows in this case, but oh, I forgot, I actually expanded that. First you go down here, my bad, and do get the SDK for an existing IDE, and then the download link. Come on in here, click the approval, and then start your download. Once your download is finished, go ahead and run the Android setup. It finds your JDK, hopefully. Then go ahead and Pick your install configuration. I want it to actually be in that folder. I like keeping all the like-minded tools together. Go ahead and let it make a start menu. This part's fairly quick, so I'll just let it go ahead and do it. I believe it's just a zip file basically being extracted, but there you go. All right, and let it start the SDK Manager. This is where the Android install gets a little bit confusing. So here is the SDK Manager. SDK Manager is where you configure the various SDKs that are available for Android. Android has hundreds of them. Basically, it's all the versions going back to like 1.5. I'm not sure they're still available, but all the old versions of Android, yep, going all the way back to 1.5. There are various extra libraries and such are all available here. The USB driver is key. That's if you want to be able to debug on your own device. This one's also kind of key. If you're running an Intel CPU, a lot of times it's good to use the Intel emulator. It runs much faster. You will find the Android emulator is slow as hell. It's one of the most painful things you'll ever use, but it's better if you don't have a device or if you need to test a plethora of devices, it's kind of your only option. Now the key thing here is you want the Android SDK tools. That basically is Android. You also want to install at least one platform's build tools. Platforms have a version number here, but it doesn't necessarily correspond with anything you know. So if you look, Android 5 is API 21. As of writing, or at least as of the time that we're doing this, that's a little too cutting edge for us. So let's go back and we'll instead install the 4.42 version. You need to have at least one installed. Don't really need to install all of this stuff. Most of it's pretty slow. You don't need glass. Sources are handy if you're debugging. Take up a fair bit of disk space, but I would probably install them for the most part. This is your Intel chipset-based emulator image, and this is your ARM-based. It's probably worthwhile installing both. I won't bother with the samples. They just take up space. All right. So, like I said, take the defaults that they give you up here for the build tools, install at least one sensible platform, and let it install what it picked down here, the USB driver for sure, and if you're on a modern Intel CPU, this guy's a good idea. It accelerates the Intel emulator executable, and then let it do its thing. This is accept the licensing and install. This takes a long time. It's going to go ahead and download everything and then configure it. So I will see you after the break. Alright, after some time, about 15 minutes on my computer, it'll have finished downloading and installing everything. You'll get this dialog prompting you basically to stop it and restart the SDK Manager. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll close it down. Shut it down, and then let's locate it. So there's the SDK Manager is in the root folder. Once again, you can bring up the installer at any time. This enables you to get the newest versions. It'll automatically check when you start up and give you suggestions. They're going to be annoying, like trying to get me to install Android 5 every time. But there you go. So we now have a fully configured Android SDK. So come back in here. Our next step, purely optional. This is the Gwt SDK. Gwt is Google Web Toolkit. It's a neat little thing Google created years ago that allows you to compile Java code to JavaScript code. I mention this because this is actually what LibGDX uses for their HTML targets. You don't need to install the SDK per se. It does make life easier. So first off, if you're not doing HTML with LibGDX, don't bother with this step. You don't need it at all. If you are, however, go ahead and get it. The nice thing is the install. You click here to install it. It's a zip file. I literally just come on in here, grab it, folder you want to put it in, paste, and that's the install. So GWT, completely up to you. I am going to be doing some web work later on, so I'm going to go ahead and install it. Again, when you install and configure Eclipse, a lot of the stuff is actually going to be set up for you, but it is easier to have it in its own separate path, sort of like how the Android SDK on its own is an easier approach. So if you are going to go this route, do this as opposed to the bundled with the Eclipse route. Trust me on that. So I'll let this go ahead and do its copy, and then we have our one final step, and that is LibGDX itself. LibGDX installer could not be simpler. You go over here and you download the setup app. The setup app is a jar file. Jar file is sort of like a cross between a zip and an executable. It actually is a zip, but Java is set up to run them, so that's in my downloads folder. And there. The catch is going to be you may, depending on your OS level, Windows 7 or earlier may actually have required a reboot at this point. Mac OS or Linux, I'm not sure. Sometimes you have to reboot, sometimes you do not. You'll find out now. Come on in here, double click this. If it runs, congratulations, you just ran your first Java application. And this is your basic setup tool. You've probably seen it, and if you've done any of my other tutorials, I've probably already gone through this thing. I may cover it a bit more in the future. It's very simple. Top one is the name of your application you want to create, and then your package name. This is the unique identifier for your company. It's in reverse URL format. However, if you don't own it, you know what? If you're publishing a game, get a domain so that it guarantees that that ID is actually yours. If you're just playing around, you can make it com dot whatever you want, but that's what package is. And then finally, game class. This is your entry point. Let's go ahead and call it demo. So the code generator is basically just going to create a class named demo for you. Pick the directory you want to create your code in. It's going to ask you for the location of your Android SDK. In this case, it's set right. The LibGDX version, you have no options here. Here you pick which targets you want to support. I'm going to go ahead and target every platform supported. And here you go ahead and pick your extensions. This is what's going to resolve all the dependencies for your project. If you're not using it, don't get it. Pretty simple concept. I'll go through them quickly to explain what they are. Bullet is a 3D physics engine. FreeType is a bitmap text generator. Tools is a collection of tools included with LibGDX. I would go ahead and add them because you'll never know if you're going to need them. Some of the tools include particle editor, sprite sheet maker, those kind of things. Controllers is for gamepad support. Box2D, I don't know why that one's always checked by default, but Box2D is a popular 2D physics engine. So again, Bullet 3D, 3D physics engine, Box2D, 2D physics engine. Box2D Lite is a light emulator system that depends on Box2D. Ashley is an entity component system. Component-based development is getting more and more popular. It's Unity kind of led the way, but it's where you compose your data out of components and controllers and containers. Ashley is a sample framework that allows you to do that. AI is extensions for AI. It's pretty early on. I think there's only one or two in there. One of them might be an A-star algorithm, which is used for pathfinding and very handy. Very early feature, but over time you'll probably see more and more in there. Finally, critically, go into advanced. Advanced, let's just forget about Maven for now. Maven's an evil thing. IDEA or Eclipse, you click either one of these and it will generate a project file for you. You don't actually have to. You can import this whole build process is actually using something called Gradle, and you can import a Gradle project into either solution just as easily as creating a project, although this does give you an extension that you can literally double click and open in your IDE of choice. So what you do here is up to you. And then offline mode is, as it says, it doesn't download all the dependencies, so it pulls everything down and then leaves you off. It doesn't keep you up to date necessarily, but it should make things a bit quicker for you. So pick what you want, go ahead and save, and then finally just generate. You need Android API 20. Okay, this is unfortunate. It's explicitly forcing me to download 20. So I guess 20 it is. And I do not want 5. Alright, so go ahead, do that install. That's the most recent version. The setup is going to dictate this to you. By the time you hear this, it's probably changed already, so be prepared to download whatever version of the Android SDK it wants you to do. Again, this is just the actual SDK after the fact. The Sdk Manager supports dozens and dozens of SDKs. Like I said, this is just downloading a very specific version of it. I'll go ahead and pause this so we don't have to wait for the entire install to finish. Okay, so now that is done, I should be able to close that out and go ahead and generate. This now goes off and runs Gradle. As I said, Gradle is like a build manager or a builder for Java-based projects. It is going to go out and get all of the different pieces that Java depends on and download them for your file. So here we go. We are now done. We have a finished project, and our Java is fully configured. So next step would be to configure whichever IDE we're going to use. The process is completely different depending on which one you choose, so I will do it as separate videos. So follow up next, we will look at creating either an Eclipse project where we will then load it and run a desktop, an Android, and a web project for each one, and then we'll also demonstrate in a separate video how to get set up with IntelliJ and do the same 3 projects running. So there we go. This video covered getting your basic Java environment up and running so that you're ready to do Java and Android development, possibly web, for LibGDX using Java 7. Hope that was useful. Thank you.